You. Thank you.
Yeah. And the best way for me to sum up my position is my goal is trying to get as many dollars out of Denver to Montana and Wyoming as I can. So with that, we'll kick it off. As Paul said, EDA received $3 billion with a B dollars of the Arpa funding to deploy across the nation. So this meeting is being recorded. Okay. So with that, I will start my presentation. The EDA, our whole mission is basically job creation, job retention, diversification, and resiliency sort of things. So if there's any sort of a project that has that sort of component to it or components to it, then I always suggest think EDA. I'm going to skip a couple of these slides, but our investment priorities did change with the new administration. So we've got 7 of them now. I think we had 5 before. So this is a list of them: equity, recovery and resilience, workforce development, manufacturing, technology-based economic development, environmentally sustainable development, and exports and foreign direct investment. Basically, for a project to be competitive and truly eligible, a project has to fit under at least one of these investment priorities. And that link that's on the web or on the PowerPoint here, that eda.gov about investment priorities, has a little blurb about each one of those that I'd recommend checking out. The titles are pretty self-explanatory, but there's a little more information on our website. So these are our plethora of programs we've got EDA-wide, and basically it's everything from planning to implementation dollars. I wouldn't get too caught up on which bucket it actually comes out of. But with that, we'll start with the ARPA funding. We talked about the $3 billion, and there is a subset and actually a bit of an ongoing theme through all of the $3 billion, and there's funding set aside for coal-impacted areas. So $300 million of that $3 billion is set aside for coal-impacted areas. And I'll get into more detail about which buckets have their set aside for coal-impacted areas. These are the 6 different NOFOs, the Notice of Funding Opportunities. We'll go into each one in greater detail. The numbers seem huge here, but when they get divided by 6, it whittles them down significantly. So statewide planning, Build Back Better challenge is the behemoth, I guess, of all of them that we've got. Travel and tourism and outdoor recreation, economic adjustment assistance. This is actually one of our flagship programs we've had for I think the entire time EDA has been around. We have an Indigenous communities one, and then a Good Jobs challenge. And this next slide, the one, all that changed was there's a set aside for $100 million under the Build Back Better for coal impacted areas, as well as $200 million under the economic adjustment assistance. So the statewide planning funding, this is a non-competitive grant going to the governor's office in the amount of $1 million. It sounds like the governor's office is going to keep this funding to do some statewide planning, whether it's a statewide SEDS. I think the details are still being worked out, but they've been made aware of the fact that there is a $1 million available, 100% grant to the state of Montana. On the same token, we have a travel and tourism NOFO that also has some non-competitive funding in it. Montana received just shy of $3 million in non-competitive money, again, to the governor's office. I think the details are still being worked out if this is going to be handed off to another agency of the state or not, but these funds can ultimately be sub-awarded on a competitive basis. However, the state would like to do it, so maybe it would be to some of the destination marketing organizations or something like that. It could actually go for projects, whether it's infrastructure or something along those lines too, but the details are still being worked out. So if you've got some travel and tourism projects, we also have a competitive bucket of money. Here it says $240 million, but that's nationwide. Our Denver region ended up with just shy of $20 million to cover our 10 states. So not a humongous bucket of money, but still some funding available for some travel and tourism projects that EDA typically might not fund in the past. I'll talk about the deadlines. Any of our Denver regional office funding we've got two soft deadlines, if you will. The first one is any application received by October 1 of this year will be reviewed in October with decisions likely in November. The second round will be February 1 of next year. Those applications received by February 1 will be reviewed in February with decisions likely in March of 22. So, and that Denver regional allocation goes for the travel and tourism, the economic adjustment assistance, and the Indigenous communities funding. So with that, I'll go to the Indigenous communities funding. We have $100 million again nationwide. The Denver region received just a little over $11 million to cover our 10 states. And this funding is truly just set aside for tribes. Tribes have to be the applicant. They're the only ones that can apply in our area. There's other areas, I think it was in Hawaii and some other place, but it's for our states, it's going to have to be a tribe that applies for the funding. But it's everything from a community center to whatever it is that's going to help the tribe become more resilient. Again, 11 million divided by 10 states, of which some states have more tribes than others. I'm not exactly sure if it's going to be bigger projects we try to fund, if it's, 3 or 4 multi-million-dollar ones, or is it going to be a few more that are smaller? It's just going to, I think, depend on what we get for applications coming in. The next one is our economic adjustment assistance funding. It shows $500 million nationwide, but truly the Denver region received right at $59 million, of which there's a subset for coal impacted areas of 24 million of that $59 million. So the total bucket's $59 million. The coal impacted subset of that $59 million is 23.8. This is truly our most flexible money, from funding infrastructure to planning to whatever it's truly going to take to make an area more resilient. The match on this is an 80-20 for a base rate, and it can go up to 100% with adequate justification for lack of match. This one also has that October and February deadline, like I mentioned, under travel and tourism. The Good Jobs Challenge, this is a nationwide challenge, and it's truly soft money. So there's no brick and mortar funding here, but it's truly kind of a wraparound program where we have an employer that needs a certain set of skills, and we have a training entity, whether it's a college, a university, whoever's going to do the training, that can provide those skills. And so it's developing the program, but at the same time having a company or companies on the other end indicating they need to hire people with those skills. And then the last one is the behemoth of our 6 buckets, and it's $1 billion of funding available nationwide. This is a mind-boggling number, honestly. It's set up in 2 phases. The first phase is truly a planning phase, of which EDA plans to fund 50 to 60 applicants up to $500,000 each to do the planning to figure out what it is they would like to do in phase 2, which is truly the implementation phase of some helping promote some emerging cluster or truly take the economy, I guess, to the next level. The expectation on phase 2 is we would fund 20 to 30 is the number I'm hearing of projects, anywhere from 25 to 75 million and even up to $100 million each. So big dollars and huge opportunity, but probably will be likely competitive. I really think a project in this bucket is going to have to be probably multi-state or something for showing the regional impact, but this is definitely uncharted territory. So I'd be more than happy to visit with anyone about any ideas they've got. There's the 2 phases that I just talked about. So again, I think EDA is just definitely trying to think big with the funding packages we got going out here. But I guess with that, I would open it up for questions or discussion from anyone on the line.
Kirk, there was one question in the chat box. If our app is not awarded in round one, will it automatically be put into round two?
That is a great question. And I think it's going to depend on what the decision was, if it was denied or if it was carried forward. So if it was denied, we'd have to apply again. But if it was carried forward, then, and the difference truly is denied is there either was a lack of funding or competitiveness. And then the carry forward is, we think it would be competitive, but we have some more questions. So I think it's going to depend on how it would be decisioned.
Kirk, on the economic adjustment bucket for the Denver region, I just want to make sure I got the numbers correct. I think that you had mentioned 59 million, 24 of the 59 went to coal country. So that leaves
right.
35 million in that bucket for non-coal country projects. Is that right? For Denver region?
Right. Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Okay.
And Kirk, this is Charlene Johnson. How is coal country defined? There was a document out there that had a list of coal counties or coal communities, and it wasn't totally accurate. So how is that defined?
So it's truly everything from the coal mine or power plant all the way down to industries that's in the supply chain that support the coal industry. So it can be really broad. I think it's just a matter of the applicant defining it and showing the impact and how the project would help make the area more resilient.
For those of us that are in the business of revolving loan funds, there isn't an obvious bucket that says revolving loan funds. So would it be appropriate to assume that the economic adjustment area is where that would fall, or would it fall under a number of these?
No, it would be probably there, but at the same time, and I haven't heard this lately, but when we were approaching the rumor stage of what the NOFOs were going to look like, the message I was receiving was the RLFs may not be as competitive, but and I think it was likely due or mostly due to how many dollars in RLF went in their CARES last summer. So, but it would be under EAA is where we would look to apply for.
Thank you.
We have another.
And our website, if I,
chat.
oh, okay.
Did you want me to go with that, Paul?
Oh yeah, what do we
It's
talks
from,
about tourism grants. Have seen several different dates on the site. NOFO says no deadline, but advises by January 31st. I have also seen October 15th as the first deadline and the second in March. Could you clarify?
And this is the travel and tourism one, is that what?
Yes.
Yeah, so the NOFO, yeah, we have lots of dates going on. So essentially, funds are available until all funds have been expended or January 31st of 22. So I think that's consequently the reason of our February 1 applications received by February 1 deadline for the Denver regional money. So basically the travel and tourism, the EAA funding, the economic adjustment assistance, and the Indigenous communities ones all have that October 1 and February 1 deadline. So applications received by each of those will be reviewed shortly thereafter and decisions made the following month.
I see that Joe Willauer very politely has his hand up, which never happens with a Butte guy. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
Gonna throw a curveball every once in a while. No, Kirk, thanks for joining us today. The question I had is for the Build Back Better regional challenge project than certainly our organization has ever taken on for that, do you think they're looking for like statewide, I mean, small region, like our little headwaters region? Do you have any concept of how big that should be to be competitive?
I truly think it needs to be multi-state. And it's partly if you just back into the number of the budget when they're saying $25 to $100 million in grants going out. Those are huge numbers. So what I've been telling everyone is I don't think we should look at multi-state to totally impact the outcome you desire for your project, but if it would fit to look at multi-state, I think that's where the region definition will likely be most competitive on a larger scale.
Thank you.
Kirk, Alyssa asks, do you see a potential fit with applying for these grants and using Big Sky Trust Fund as match or local match only, perhaps from buckets for planning or workforce development / job creation?
Yeah, I think Big Sky Trust Fund would be a great source for match.
Are there other questions of Kirk?
Hey, Kirk. Yeah. I didn't raise my hand this time. I know when we were at Meet Aboard last week, there was discussion of whether this was going to occur or not. And it sounds like it's essentially a statewide SEDS. Do you have any feeling as to whether the administration's going to want to take that on?
That's what I am guessing. At least part of the funding will be used for that statewide planning grant. But I think their deadline is maybe next week to give us an idea of what they'd like to do with it. But that and maybe assessing some of the workforce, either training or skills that we already currently have was another one. But I think they're still trying to pare down exactly what that scope of work will look like.
Thank you. And then for the workforce one, I mean, that's the issue all of us are dealing with. I mean, do you have any ideas what a good project would look like for that, aside from what you shared with, really tailoring it through a university to one employment basis? Do you think there's any opportunity for us to go bigger on that?
And that's on the Good Jobs Challenge?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I have a good example, but the NOFO on page 10 has, actually it starts on page 9. 9 and 10 give 3 different examples of, there's a region A, B, and C, but I would maybe direct you to go check those out of sort of things they're looking for. But it's truly that wraparound. We have the employer that says, I need these skills, and we have the trainer that's going to train them. And if they need to develop the curriculum, that's where we can assist.
Thank you.
Kirk, there's another message in the message box here that says, since it sounds like the Denver office has different deadlines than the national office on the tourism grants, will they be sending a separate notice since we submit through grants.gov?
Yeah, that's why we were calling them soft deadlines, is that with CARES Act, we did monthly deadlines, and then at the very end, we ended up getting some really good projects, but we didn't have funding to fund them. So our goal now is to try and have these deadlines and have people apply to them. There's a plan, I guess, or we won't spend all of the money in October, so there will be funds intentionally held over into for the February deadline. So the NOFO, I think, gives the guideline of March 15th on most of these as the drop dead date, but truly the funds have to be awarded by September of next year. So this is a way of trying to organize some slight competition, at least within the region.
and Kirk, I apologize if you've already mentioned this, but when it comes to the two deadlines of October and February, are you setting certain amounts of dollars aside for that second deadline in February, even if you're overprescribed in October?
Yeah, I've been told the intention is to have, whether it's half, a third, 2/3, I don't know what the percentage would be, but there will be money. We won't spend it all in October, is what I've been told.
Okay. Jason, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Paul. Kirk, on the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation program, what's the total amount in grant funds available for the competitive side for Montana and Wyoming? And on those grants, can a nonprofit like mine, can we partner with a state agency for building an infrastructure project within, say, our state park here in Glendive?
So the funding is, we're just shy of 20 million for our 10 states. So there's no specific amount for Montana, Wyoming directly, but
Okay.
it's actually a competition for our 10 states. And our 10 states are Iowa, Missouri to Montana, and the Dakotas to Utah. So those are our 10 states. And as far as eligible applicant, it's basically anyone but a for-profit can apply for them. So what I've been telling people is just keep in mind that if every state got their equal share, it'd be a $2 million grant or total of grants to the state. So whether we're going to do 5 $4 million ones or 10 $2 million ones or $2,500,000 ones, I don't know, and we won't know until we get the applications in. But it's uncharted territory, so I'm really not sure what a good tourism project is, which sounds terrible, but I'm
We need
being
a
honest.
campground in our state park. That's what we need.
What'd you say?
We need a new campground for our
Oh.
state, for Makoshka State Park, which we're looking to hit. Looks like we might hit 150,000 visitors this year.
Yeah, and again, I think it's going to stem around job creation, any sort of private investment, which I think both of those are not going to be humongous numbers in the travel and tourism area. But if we can show any and demonstrate any, I think that's going to be probably what makes it more competitive than some of the others, maybe.
One other question, Kirk, if you don't mind, on the build back, the regional challenge part, does it have to be an actual infrastructure, like a shovel-ready project, or can you get money for planning for that, or how does that work?
So the first phase is for planning, but to me, the short timeline of the phase 1 application is due by October 19th. The phase 2 application is due March 15th. So if it's not shovel ready, I think it has to be well thought out and ready to pounce. But the short deadlines, I think, are going to somewhat dictate how that's going to work out, though.
Kirk, this is Billy. Question to you on, would it be helpful? It probably would be more helpful to us than you with everything you've got to do, but to send you kind of a page one, since tourism and outdoor recreation is new, kind of a synopsis of what we would like to submit, so that you are kind of aware of where we're going on a project. Does that make any sense to you at all? Where are you in that? I know with your schedule, that's probably hard to do.
Yeah, I think Denver's also trying to keep a list of all potential projects coming in. So if I'm aware of them, then I can make them aware of them. So I think that's a good strategy.
Thanks.
Kirk, so looking at the Build Back program a little bit better and the eligible entities, the one question I have, it said that it's it has public or private nonprofit organization or association acting in cooperation with officials of a political subdivision of state. What exactly does that mean?
It's the county or city. So it's basic. That's our standard language for any of our programs, is that if a nonprofit applies for funding, they need to get a letter of support from a county commission or mayor or somebody that's an elected official, indicating that that project aligns with what they see the area needs or fits in with the strategy for the area.
Thanks.
Are there other questions?
Yeah,
Just don't
Kirk, you know, everybody on the call, I'm sure, is going to be submitting to these. Do you have any advice for all of us? Just kind of blanket statements that would help make all of our grants
Your connection's not working, Joe.
if they could be.
Something about blanket statements, and then I didn't catch anymore.
Can you hear me now?
Now you're
It's a
clear.
lot better now. But now you're on mute.
Maybe.
Can you hear me now?
Sort of.
I'll drop it into the
But not
chat.
now. There. Now you're coming in clear.
Hey, Kirk, Joe's question was, do you have any advice for us to make our apps the most competitive they can be?
You know, if it's the Build Back Better, there's, I think it's on page 32, there is a scoring criteria of, I think it's 10 or 11 areas. So I would recommend looking at those. You know, other than saying, look at the NOFO, that's probably the most important thing. And each one is 50 pages. That sounds crazy, but if you look at, say, from page 5 to 15, that's probably going to be 90% of what you need to know for each one. And if you read it and the light comes on of, oh yeah, this project would be great, that's the sort of criteria I guess I'd recommend. There's a lot of information between all 6 of them.
Well, Kirk, I don't see any new questions in the chat box. Are there any other final questions that folks have of Kirk? Doesn't look like it, Kirk. Thank you for doing this. I know that there's been a lot of questions about how to access these EDA ARPA funds, and you've certainly helped us go down the path of demystifying how to apply and deadlines and buckets. I would ask, is it possible for you to share with everybody, maybe through Gloria, your slide deck? Can you send us your PowerPoint presentation?
It's actually available on our website too. I changed the order a little bit, but at that ARPA, eda.gov/ARPA, there's a whole bunch of one-pagers. There's recorded webinars on all of these as well that have been coming out over a period of probably 6 weeks. So I would recommend checking those out too, but I can definitely email the slide deck too.
Gloria, you don't mind doing that, do you?
No, I don't mind at all. Happy to
That'd be
do that.
great. Yeah, Kirk, if you could get that to Gloria, she'll get it to all of us. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's nice having that point of reference in our inbox. Well, unless there are any final comment, did I hear somebody?
I have one last one. I put it in the chat, but Kirk, how important is the development of the nexus to COVID on these portions of the grant? I know it was critical on the CARES Act, but
Yeah, it's not required on the ARPA funding, so the COVID nexus with CARES is not applicable under ARPA.
okay. That's a happy thing.
Well, with that, unless there are additional comments or questions, Kirk, anything for the good of the order?
No, I just think there's a chance for some unique opportunities for funding here. So hopefully we're able to attract as many dollars to Montana as we can.
Great. Are you saying that same thing to Wyoming?
Well, maybe.
We want their money too. Well, Kirk, thank you very much. This has been helpful. And I know that you're just a phone call or an email away. You're always very helpful with assisting us with any questions that we have. So we appreciate that.
Yep, no
Thanks for
problem.
all your help, Kirk.
Thank you, Kirk.
Paul, I will post this recording under our events on our events tab on our website.
That's perfect, Gloria. Thank you.
You bet.
And Kirk, we'll see you in a couple weeks in Marr County in person.
I hope so.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks for
Thank
joining.
you.
Bye-bye.